and welcome to another episode in the Delta Conveyance Deep Dive video series. Today's topic is one that confronts us in the headlines pretty much every day. We hear constantly about how much more frequent floods, hurricanes, wildfires, and rapidly rising sea levels are all connected to the ways that human activity is changing the climate of our planet, and with potentially disastrous results. To help us understand how this will impact California specifically, and how the Delta Conveyance Project hopes to provide some solutions, I've invited California State Climatologist Mike Anderson and DWR Assistant Deputy Director John Andrew to join me for our discussion today. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Pleasure to be here with you and Mike.
Before we get started, tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and your work here at DWR. Mike?
All right, thanks, Pat. My name is Michael Anderson. I'm the currently state climatologist for the Department of Water Resources. It's a collaborative position between the department and the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. I've been in this role for 15 years, about like the time I've been with the department. Joined the department as a river forecaster in the Division of Flood Management and continue to work with the Hydrology and Flood Operations Office to this day.
And John, can you tell us a little bit about your position at DWR?
Sure, Pat. I'm John Andrew, and as you noted, I'm the Assistant Deputy Director of the Department of Water Resources, where I've overseen the department's climate change activities since 2006. So I've been in my position about as long as Mike Anderson has been in his. My portfolio encompasses a broad range of climate activities, carbon mitigation, climate analysis, and climate adaptation, a good bit of public outreach as well, and looking forward to the conversation with you and Mike today.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with the basics. This first question I'll send to Mike. What is climate change?
All right, thank you, Pat. Climate change we're experiencing is a warming planet. Temperatures are getting warmer, and we see this in our data of annual average temperatures. Each year of late being in the warmest edge of the distribution of temperatures that we've recorded since 1895. This is caused by increasing greenhouse gases, and greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere, and they work much like a greenhouse does to keep your plants warm. It lets sunlight in, but doesn't let the heat escape. And so we find that the sunlight can still come down and warm the planet, but the planet doesn't get a chance to cool off and send heat back into space as effectively.
So the next question is to both of you, starting with Mike. What are some of California's unique climate characteristics?
Thanks, Pat. California is located in a fantastic place on the planet. We occupy 75% of the Pacific coast of the lower 48 states. We have a fantastic range of rainfall totals from the southeast deserts, which get on average less than 5 inches a year, to the temperate rainforests of the north coast, which can get over 120 inches in a year. Year to year, we experience more variability in our precipitation total outcomes than anywhere else in the lower 48 states. California's topography is an important role in that precipitation arriving in California, as we have weather systems that come off the Pacific Ocean and include atmospheric rivers, or narrow bands of water vapor that get pushed up against the mountains, leading to heavy precipitation in particular locations. We see a range of precipitation increasing as we move from south to north, but the mountains in California, particularly the Sierra Nevada, actually increase in elevation from north to south. This creates a really unique environment of a mix of rain and snow and how water falls and runs off.
And John, what would you emphasize about California's unique climate characteristics?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. And just to build on Mike's excellent answer, the challenge for water managers in this environment, this climate in California, is its variability, going from wet to dry, back to wet, having, multiple years of one or the other. And in that type of environment, we really need to have a portfolio of responses. The challenge presenting water managers in California is more uncertainty. And the natural response is a portfolio of approaches. The governor has, as you know, a water resilience portfolio, and the Delta Conveyance is one of the key parts of that portfolio to respond to climate change.
Great. Okay, so given that, what impacts will climate change have on hydrology, the science of the movement of water, in California, Mike?
The narrative of climate change, as the world gets warmer, we actually see a change in that distribution of rain and snow. We see snow falling at a higher elevation, which then builds up our seasonal snowpack as limited to a smaller area of the mountains. This changes the way runoff happens to where we have more of the runoff from the rainstorms happen during the storm event itself, creating a flood hazard potentially, and leaving less to run off in the spring to be able to store and use for the dry summers. The other aspect of that is that as that wet season is limited more to the wettest storms, we find that the rainiest days get wetter with more dry days in between. And this will lead to a longer dry season with higher temperatures bringing more heat, drying out the landscape even more.
Thanks, Mike. So John, what is the major takeaway for Department of Water Resources regarding how it manages water resources for the state of California?
Yeah, I think the major takeaway is, I think a fundamental tactic even in response to climate change is flexibility. The conditions that Mike just described, are going to lead again to more uncertainty to when water shows up and when it's going to be there, what its quality is going to be, how it's going to interact with, with ecosystems and habitat, and the ability to, move water when water's available is going to be an incredibly, valuable option for the state, whether that's to move water directly to users, move it into storage, either above ground or to recharge many of our great aquifers around the state. So I think that's the main takeaway is to build our capacity to be flexible, to be nimble, to respond to conditions as we see them in real time.
Thanks, that was very interesting. As well as hearing about it getting hotter and drier, we also hear a lot about climate change increasing the severity of the very wet storms that we can expect in California. And that might sound a little bit confusing to the public. So Mike, could you explain to us how those facts are not incompatible?
Yes, thank you, Pat. So I mentioned atmospheric rivers, and these are the wettest storms that we get, but we have these narrow bands of water vapor, with that water being squeezed out like a sponge over our mountains. As the world gets warmer, it can hold more water vapor, meaning more water can then be squeezed out in each of those storms. So if we look at it and we say that currently we get 5 good storms, and if we say each storm dropped 10 inches, that would be a total of 50 inches for the year. If in the future we only get 4 of those storms, so we have 1 fewer storm, but each storm could be 20% bigger, so 12 inches, and we'd have 4 at 12 inches, would be 48 inches. Well, each of those 4 storms are larger, but our annual precip has still gone down a little bit. And that's one way that we might experience that feature.
So John, what are some of the policy initiatives that DWR has underway to deal with some of these climate change issues and the uncertainty involved in them?
Yeah, Pat, and I think uncertainty again is one of the key words as part of this conversation. What Dr. Anderson is describing is, water managers are used to uncertainty. Let's start with that. There's a lot of natural variability in California, so uncertainty is our business, so to speak. But climate change is really going to exacerbate that in a lot of different ways, and I think Mike has described that really well. Our responses, state initiatives are are really varied, and it goes back to a portfolio approach. Again, I mentioned the governor's water resilience portfolio and different actions the state of California is taking, including projects like Delta Conveyance. There's also regional portfolios, and we've been a huge supporter and investor in regions around the state through a program called Integrated Regional Water Management, where each region has a diversified portfolio of options available to them to address this uncertainty. Another major initiative I'll mention at the state level, which was enacted just a few years ago, is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Finally, trying to move our aquifers from, many of them in a really degraded state, and trying to, over the next 20 years, move them more towards sustainability. And all of these actions, the state actions, the regional actions, especially those on groundwater, and projects like Delta Conveyance, all need to work together to support each other.
Great. Okay, thank you. So our next question is on sea level rise. One of the results of a warming planet that we hear a lot about is sea level rise due to melting ice in the Arctic and Antarctic and glaciers around the world. How will sea level rise affect the operation of the State Water Project in the Delta? And could sea level rise threaten the water that comes out of water tops in California households? And this is to Mike first.
All right, thank you, Pat. So let's talk about sea level rise and the San Francisco Bay Delta region. So along California, as I mentioned, long coastline, the tides they experience, they'll start seeing the mean tide level continue to rise, and the infrastructure along the coast will feel the impacts of that. With the San Francisco Bay region, we have the Golden Gate, which is an opening from the interior bay and delta systems out to the ocean. So with each tide coming in, a new volume of water will now be added to that. How the communities that surround the San Francisco Bay region and the Delta respond to that increase in water pouring in will impact what ultimately happens in the Delta and the operation of the water projects that currently make use of the surface channels of the Delta to move water.
Thank you. So John, how will some of DWR's policy initiatives help to mitigate these climate change impacts to the state's water delivery system, the State Water Project?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And again, Dr. Anderson presents, there's conditions that we're already living with and are probably going to get worse in the Delta in terms of sea level rise, changing salinity of the water. So it's not just a matter of the water quantity issue is big enough, but there's also going to be a quality component, and there's already existing ecosystem issues in the Delta, and those will also be affected by the rise in sea levels. One direct response is the Delta Conveyance Project. By being able to move the intake for the State Water Project out of the South Delta and up into the north, we'll be into an area where we're, the risk of water supply interruption and the improvement of water quality, and also improvements to how the system interacts with ecosystems is basically improved across the board. So one direct response to sea level rise is the Delta Conveyance Project. That project also fits within a portfolio of projects around the state. Certainly it's one part of one project of a multitude of projects across the state, at the state level, at the regional level. And again, they all need to work together so that we, that the state and the regional systems support each other. And when one doesn't work, the others do. And in fact, they leverage their strengths as well as limit their weaknesses.
Thanks very much. And thank you to our guests today for joining us for this deep dive video on climate change. For more information, feel free to go to the department's website at water.ca.gov. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.